Hey everyone! Welcome to Update X24H, your go-to channel for the latest news, hottest dramas, breaking stories, and all the buzz from the world of entertainment. We're here to keep you updated, entertained, and always in the loop. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because here at Update X24H, we bring you the news that matters, the drama you love, and the stories you can't miss. Thanks for being part of our community. Let's stay connected, stay updated, and keep the good vibes rolling. When a wall of denial shattered under the weight of evidence, the room didn't cheer, it fell silent. Tonight, we unpack a live interrogation that has stunned millions. 17 accused, a powerful figure at the center, and a script of blame that unspooled in real time. What truly changed in those 10 minutes when the story flipped? We begin not with spectacle, but with people. A young actor whose work traveled across languages and borders now stands, in memory, at the center of an unresolved story that many find difficult to let go. Families and friends look for clarity. Audiences look for meaning. All of us, in some way, look for a humane way to hold shock and skepticism at once. The account that has spread online speaks of a live interrogation in Beijing on November 10, 2025, naming 17 accused and a powerful figure often referred to as Li Fang. The first moments, as described, carry the peculiar calm that precedes rupture. Firm voices, measured tones, the familiar cadence of denial. I followed orders. I did not know. I was only present. Whatever one believes, that chorus is recognizable. It is the language institutions adopt when responsibility feels heavier than truth. For our purposes, we keep to principle. These are allegations circulating in the public domain, not established facts, and they must be treated with care. Yet even a disputed narrative can reveal something about us. How quickly we gather when a life seems diminished, how fiercely we ask for due process, how naturally we feel compassion for those who cannot answer back. The geography of the story, the courtroom, the date, the number of accused, matters less than the moral contour it draws. A community balancing empathy with restraint, outrage with discipline, attention with humility. If we continue, it is only to ask better questions. What does accountability look like when the cameras are rolling and certainty is not yet earned? How do we honor a human being without turning pain into fuel for entertainment? In that quiet between allegation and proof, we choose tone. We choose to speak carefully, to resist the easy rush to judgment, and to remember that dignity is not a luxury of truth, it is the path to it. The first act of this story is not loud. It is quiet, controlled, almost rehearsed. In the accounts that have circulated, 17 individuals sit under the lights of a courtroom, each carrying a version of the same sentence. I did not decide, I only obeyed. It is a choreography of denial that feels uncomfortably familiar. One voice insists he simply followed procedure. Another claims limited knowledge. A third shifts the focus to a superior figure, the name Li Fang, floating above the scene like a shield. Observers describe how the statements begin to overlap, forming a kind of protective wall built from carefully chosen words. Yet if we listen closely, we hear more than excuses. We hear the fragile mechanisms by which human beings try to distance themselves from harm they were close to. It is easier to imagine oneself as a small cog than to accept the weight of a deliberate choice. The language of hierarchy seeps into every phrase. Orders, instructions, protocol. In that space, responsibility is pushed upwards, diluted, thinned out until no single person feels like the author of anything. But denial is not only about escaping punishment. It is also, at times, a clumsy attempt to protect a sense of self, to avoid looking directly at what one has done or permitted. For viewers, this can be deeply unsettling. We recognize the pattern in smaller forms in workplaces, in institutions, even in our own lives when we say everyone was doing it or I had no choice. The difference here is scale and consequence, but the psychological script is similar. To explore this act is not to convict, for these remain allegations, but to reflect on how easily responsibility can be fragmented until it almost disappears. In doing so, we are gently invited to ask ourselves a harder question. When do we speak up, and when do we choose the safety of silence wrapped in the language of obedience? In the versions of this story that have reached the public, there is a moment when the air in the courtroom seems to change. Until then, words have been the main currency. Explanations, denials, carefully shaped phrases that soften edges and blur responsibility. Then, according to these accounts, the prosecution turns to something else entirely, what is described as recorded material and supporting documents connected to an earlier scene, allegedly beneath the 798 Art District. The details of what is shown are not ours to repeat, and they remain unverified, but what matters for our reflection is the shift it creates. The room, we are told, falls into a different kind of silence. Faces that were composed become strained. Sentences that once flowed with confidence begin to fracture. For some of the accused, the narrative suggests a move from absolute denial to partial admission, a subtle but significant change. Not "I was never there," but "I was there, yet I did not intend." For viewers following from a distance, this so-called evidence drop can feel like a turning point, almost cinematic, a clash between story and something that claims to be proof. Yet this is precisely where we must be most careful. Not every image, not every document is what it appears to be. Responsible engagement means asking difficult, technical questions. Who controlled this material? Has it been independently examined? How do we distinguish between a claim of evidence and evidence that has genuinely met rigorous standards? The temptation is to treat this moment as the triumph of truth over lies, to relax into the comfort of certainty. But a more mature response holds both possibilities at once, that serious harm may have been done, and that only patient, transparent investigation can honor the gravity of such allegations. In that tension, we are reminded that justice is not the same as spectacle, and that our hunger for answers must never outrun our respect for process. In the next movement of this narrative, the focus shifts from what is said to how a final scene is alleged to have been engineered. The circulating accounts speak of a transfer from an underground space to a private residence, of an evening arranged to resemble an ordinary gathering, with drinks, conversation, and the casual choreography of social life. At the heart of these allegations lies a single chilling idea, that what the world would later be told was an accident might have been, if any of this is true, the product of calculation rather than chance. The balcony, the height, the timing, the presence of alcohol, each element is described as if it were a piece on a board, placed with deliberate care. For many who encounter this story, it is this suggestion that cuts deepest. Not only the possibility of harm, but the possibility of harm disguised as misfortune. It touches on a fear far beyond one case. That appearances can be arranged, that narratives can be drafted before events unfold, that reality itself can be staged. And yet, here more than anywhere, caution is essential. These are still allegations, contested and unproven. To honor both the person at the center and the principles we claim to uphold, we must resist the urge to treat every disturbing claim as established fact. Instead, we can let the discomfort prompt better questions. How do we investigate when presentation and truth may not align? What safeguards are needed so that no life can be so easily explained away by a single line on a report? In that space of uncertainty, empathy and rigor must travel together. In many retellings of this case, one presence is defined precisely by its absence. Alongside the named defendants and the central figure often referred to as Li Fong, the narrative repeatedly returns to another person. A woman called Sun Ran, described as a coordinator, a planner, sometimes even as an unseen director shaping mood, timing and image from the shadows. Whether any of this can be proven is a matter for serious investigation, but the role she is set to play reveals something important about how we understand power. Not all influence sits behind a microphone or at the front of a courtroom. Some of it, if these accounts are to be believed, is exercised in the spaces between, in whispered instructions, in decisions about what is seen and what remains hidden. For viewers, the idea of a key figure who is not in the dock, not on camera, and allegedly still beyond the reach of the law creates a particular kind of unease. It leaves the story feeling unfinished, like a book with its last chapter missing. At the same time, it exposes our deep human longing for a clear map. Names, roles, a complete diagram that explains everything. But real life, especially when it touches on pain and wrongdoing, rarely offers that kind of neatness. Witnesses disagree, timelines blur, motives are layered and sometimes contradictory. The rumors around this absent figure should therefore remind us of two things at once: that networks of harm, if they exist, are often more complex than a single villain, and that responsible people resist filling gaps with pure speculation. Between what is claimed and what is confirmed lies a space that demands humility, careful journalism, and patient legal work. It is in that space that the most important questions still wait for honest answers. Part of the reason this story clings to people's minds is that it presses on several deep emotional nerves at once. At the most basic level, there is grief, the sense of a young life interrupted, of talent and quiet moments that will never unfold. Even when the facts are disputed, the idea of a person at the center of such a narrative awakens a natural tenderness. We imagine families, colleagues, fans who once saw only promise, now forced to live with questions instead of answers. Layered over that grief is anger. Listeners hear about alleged cruelty, about blame being redirected, about responsibility wrapped in the soft language of procedure, and something inside protests. It is not just outrage at what might have been done, but at the thought that human suffering could be treated as a technical detail. Alongside these emotions sits fear, often unspoken. If any part of the allegations were ever shown to be true, they would suggest that appearances can be arranged, stories can be curated, and the line between performance and reality can be disturbingly thin. That thought unsettles us because it suggests that the world is less stable and less fair than we would like to believe. Yet there is also another, quieter feeling at work, doubt used in its healthiest form. Many viewers sense that the narrative is incomplete, that important facts have not been tested in the open. They feel a responsibility not to confuse allegation with certainty. To hold compassion, indignation, and caution together is emotionally demanding, which is why people feel this story so intensely. It asks them not only what they believe about one case, but what kind of person they wish to be when confronted with the pain of strangers and the temptation of easy conclusions. When a story like this captures public attention, the question is not only what happened, but what we choose to do with our focus. One path leads to endless repetition of shock, rewatching the same fragments until they numb us. Another path, more demanding but far more humane, is to turn that attention into something constructive. Viewers can begin by strengthening their own tools, learning how to read sources critically, how to separate allegation from confirmation, how to recognize language that manipulates emotion. Simple, shared resources, a short checklist, a community-built timeline based only on verifiable information, can turn passive spectators into active, responsible witnesses. At the same time, creators and audiences together can insist on pauses rather than escalation. Moments of silence, messages of support directed not at rumors but at broader principles, such as safer working environments and better mental health support in the industry. Even small acts, like encouraging respectful discussion in the comments, or sharing links to reputable organizations that promote transparency and legal fairness, shift the tone from consumption to care. In this way, attention stops being a fuel for rumors and becomes a quiet investment in a culture that responds to pain with thoughtfulness instead of appetite. As we step back from this difficult narrative, it is important to remember that dignity does not need to wait for perfect knowledge. The accounts we have explored remain allegations, and it is the work of courts, investigators, and serious journalism to test them with rigor. Our task here is different but no less meaningful: to refuse both cruelty and carelessness in the way we speak. Behind every rumor is a human being who once laughed with friends, worked long hours worried about their future, just as we do. Behind every name mentioned are families who did not choose the spotlight but must live with its glare. To honor that, we hold two commitments at once. We stand firmly against any form of violence or exploitation, if and wherever it is proved, and at the same time we resist turning suspicion into certainty, or tragedy into entertainment. If there is a lesson to carry with us, it is that a more humane culture begins in small decisions: to question before sharing, to discuss without dehumanizing, to let compassion guide our curiosity. In a noisy world, choosing that path is a quiet act of courage, and it is one we can all practice.